Could we talk a bit about AARES, which was originally the Australian Agricultural Economics Society? Now, you were there at the birth.
I was at the very birth, that's right. In 1957, I came across from Perth.
Where was the meeting?
It was in Sydney. It was in what was then the Rural Bank of Sydney, and I think there were probably, it was largely on the initiative of Keith Campbell but some other people. They had a very strong group in the State Department of Agriculture in New South Wales even then, and also in their rural bank, and there was probably a group of 20 or 30 agricultural people who could call themselves agricultural economists. They convened this meeting, and as a result of the meeting, I went over as a student.
Oh, right.
So I was pretty young, pretty green. I think I would have been 23 when I went there. I was at that meeting, and a couple of years ago I was at the 60th meeting. I think I was the only one that had traversed the whole lot. But it was a great society. Keith Campbell was the initial president of it. 4 or 5 years later, Henry Schapper became the president of it. I did my term a bit later. And of course it went from being the Australian Agricultural Economic Society, what it is now is the Australasian Agricultural and Resource Economic Society. So, and of course now a very big institution with a very large membership with
about 600.
600 and great programs and a very sophisticated world-class institution. So it's been very gratifying to see the society move over those years and participate in some of the annual meetings. The West Australian branch at that early stage was very big. And again, it was very farmer oriented. We had a very big membership of farmers. I think in more recent years it's been largely academic, but in the early days we had a fairly large participation from a much broader section of people.
What do you remember about that first meeting? What preceded at that meeting?
Well, the one thing I can remember from that meeting is a very, very fiery confrontation between Keith Campbell and Tom Strong, who was the director of the Bureau of Agricultural Economics, and it was on the subject of cost of production surveys and the role of cost of production in price formation.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And Tom Strong was defending the Bureau's cost of production surveys. For Keith Campbell, cost of production pricing was a bête noire. It was his pet hate, and the confrontation was fiery in the extreme. There was one guy who had to sort of calm the two of them down from almost separate them. So I think that was the great message I remember. But there were other great papers. Sir John Crawford gave a very nice presentation about some very early thinking in agricultural economics, and with some characters both in the United States and Australia, I can remember there was also Henry Schapper gave a paper on surveying. Henry developed in the 1950s some very good policy-based surveys, not cost of production-based surveys, and he instigated some inquiries into management practices and why these practices that were not necessarily advocated by departments of agriculture were followed by farmers, and what the gaps between recommendations and practices were and how they could be breached. He did a very big survey into the butterfat industry in Western Australia, then the whole milk industry. I participated as a student in the whole milk one, and then went on and did some work in in the wheat belt. One thing I must have to get back to Henry about is that I didn't mention is that he was one of the first agricultural economists to take seriously the problem of Aborigines. He wrote a very interesting book. I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like Aboriginal Development under. Anyway, and it was associated with the Kimberleys, and he was very concerned that agricultural economists at that stage were going around the world advising the world on economic and social development, and we had the most intractable economic and social development issue under our own noses, and we weren't doing anything about it. And Henry said it was about time we did, and he wrote a very stimulating book. I don't really think the industry has done very much more on that subject since, but at least he pricked our consciences, and I think very rightly so.
Yeah.